Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of Cheap Smut. My name is Carl Mizell, resident husband and producer here at Smut Co. Industries, and what you're about to hear is an interview that we conducted with New York Times bestselling author Brynne Weaver here in Roanoke, Virginia at Sinful Signings 2024. It was recorded Saturday, September 21st. We had a very lovely small crowd in a very lovely conference room here in the hotel, and the conversation could not have gone more swimmingly. But in the interest of time, and because I am still currently sitting on the floor here at Sinful Signings, getting ready for another day of interacting with listeners, I'm trying to get this done as quickly as possible. So this has not been edited at all. It's going to be presented as it happened, any warts and all. So with that, we hope you enjoy this conversation with the author of the Ruinous Love Trilogy, Brynne Weaver. Excellent. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us here today. As we've already all established, we are talking to Brynne Weaver. We all know, let me get my notebook. There we go. We all know that she is known for the Ruinous Love Trilogy, but she's also known for the Diviner series, the Shadow Realm series, and a standalone romance novel called Black Sheep by Brynne and Alexa Harlow, correct? Yes.
Yep.
So let's just give her a warm Sinful Signings welcome and thank her for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So right out of the gate, I wanted to ask, how does it feel? This is an event that is very much by and from Book Talk. How did it feel to sort of get caught? And I'm still a neophyte as it pertains to Book Talk. I rely on my wife for the Book Talk stuff, but how did it feel to sort of get caught up in that swell for Butcher and Blackbird? And was there a specific moment where you were like, oh shit, this might be bigger than I thought this was going to be?
Yeah, definitely there was. When I released the book, when I first self-published it in August of last year, I didn't do a pre-order or anything like that. I'm kind of a bit of a data nerd, so I wanted to see what that would do, like if that would have a different effect than having a pre-order because of the way that Amazon kind of like ranks and calculates things. So I just like launched it live, and it was like a pretty normal launch. Nothing was crazy in the first like 2 weeks, I would say. It just kind of was like trucking along. I was doing fine, but it wasn't doing like enormous. And I didn't have a huge following or anything like that. I had maybe like 5,000 people on Instagram. And then all of a sudden on TikTok, a couple of TikTokers started to post about it. So there is Abby from Abby's Reads. She actually lives close to me and we're friends now, which is like a great benefit out of all of this happening. And Christy from Read Between the Wines, her post really blew up. And so it was literally like an overnight thing where all of a sudden it went from, trucking along to bam, it just caught fire. So, and as soon as she started posting about it, and she posted about it a couple of times, it was just like an engine that just kept going, which was great. It was very exciting, but it was a little bit mind blowing because everything that happened after that was so fast.
We've had like videos on our TikTok get like 40,000 views, and that freaks me out. Just the idea of going that mildly viral. So to experience what you experienced, to me, is an absolute nightmare. You said you're close to Abby now. Was that?
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
So
Abby lives like in the next state over. Yeah.
Okay. Because I read in a piece on CBC, you're originally from Nova Scotia, but you recently relocated, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I live in the Chicago suburbs now. Right. So we relocated in December, in the like thick of writing Leather and Lark. So that was like a pretty intense experience. I've moved countries before a couple of times actually, but it's always like quite an intimidating process when you have like a visa going on, and like there was all this stuff at my day job, and it's quite stressful because now we have a child as well, and he's 9 years old. So like, what's going to happen to him? Like going out of school and going to a completely new country. So it was like a lot going on at the same time. But now that we're here, like I really love it. And it's so nice to be closer to, a few friends from the book community. Some other authors live nearby as well, which is super nice.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Katie and I. My best friends lived in Chicago for decades. I was curious if you've sort of adopted a favorite thing to do yet in the city, a favorite place to go. Have you tried deep dish casserole pizza yet?
Yeah, we've tried deep dish. We haven't made it into the city as much as I would like, but we're going tomorrow. I have a friend who's coming over from the UK to spend. That's why I'm not here with you in person, unfortunately, but one of my best friends is coming over, so we're going to take her actually into the city and go to the Shed Aquarium. I'm like a big nature nerd, so like dying to see the otters and like maybe put one in my pocket and take it home. But
The
don't
shed
think
is
that's really
One
how it
of my
works, but I'm like,
favorite.
I'll find a way. I'm resilient.
absolutely no. My wife and I, we went to the shed.
Yes.
A few years ago, and
Yeah.
we just had some person clandestinely sneak up to us who said, I work here. You guys want to get in cheaper? And I thought it was a scam, but we got in. So I'm not really
That's awesome.
particular about that. So you are Canadian.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I read a quote. My wife and I grew up in Flint, Michigan. We grew up like an hour from Canada, so we have this sort of love and affinity for the country. But I read a quote once. I believe it was Ed Robertson from the Bare Naked Ladies, who said Canadians the Canadian sense of humor is sort of developed by this being proximal to pop culture, the pop culture epicenter that is America, but not being a part of it. Would you agree with that? In sort of like, now that you're a Canadian caught up in this sort of like America driven sensation, is
Yeah.
there something to that belief that you're part of it, but not really? That all makes sense?
I would agree with that. Yeah, it completely makes sense. I think Canadian humor is maybe a little bit more satirical, but also influenced a little bit more by British humor because of our, obvious British connections. So it is a slightly different entity for sure. Um, I lived in the UK for a while as well, so I'm probably heavily influenced by that sort of dark British sense of humor that you get a lot of exposure to when you're living there. But yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's a slightly different lens in Canada.
It's like you read my notes because
Telepathic.
I want to get to the adaptation that was recently announced back in June. But while I was reading Butcher and Blackbird, so for those of you in the room, and for Brynne, if you're not familiar, my wife, Katie, reads a smutty book every week, and then she explains the plot to me, and I have no idea what's going on. But every once in a while, I'll do a book for her, and I read Butcher and Blackbird, and I'm going to be presenting it to her. And no disrespect to Chris McKay, who has been tabbed to direct this adaptation. But the whole time I was reading it, I wanted Butcher and Blackbird written or adapted and written by Edgar Wright.
Oh yeah, that would be amazing. I love Edgar Wright. Yeah, I'm a
Yes.
huge fan.
I heard that you were an Edgar Wright fan, and I want to circle back on that. But now that you know that this is going to be adapted, are you nervous? Now, I think it was Deadline said that you have an EP credit or an executive producer
Yep.
credit on this, so you're still going to have a hand in the guiding of it. But is there any consternation or concern about, like, these are I made these people, I created them, and now you're handing them over to somebody else? Was there a level of concern when this process was going on?
Yeah, and I think my agent, so I have a literary agent who's named Kim Whalen, and then what happens is she co-agents with other agents, either like globally or in this case for entertainment specialist agents, right? So Mary and Orly are my entertainment agents, and they did a really good job in advance of saying, like, look, sometimes these discussions are really difficult for authors because of exactly that point that you just made. Like, there are some discussions, and they didn't know how they were going to go, right? Like, there are some times where they've had authors go into a talk about adapting their work into film or TV, and the producers or whoever it is that they're talking to are like, okay, we just want to buy it and you can go away now. Like, you're not going to have anything to do with it. So it's like, oh, I don't want to be in that situation, but I might be out of my hands, right? But every single discussion that we had, and we had multiple discussions with various people, whether it was screenwriters, Chris was actually the first person we talked to. Some of them were producers, there was TV, there was film, there was an actress. Like, it was just the full gamut. Every single one of them was like, we want you to be involved. You're an integral part of this whole thing. Like, this is how you're going to be involved. And with Chris, like, I was really nervous about asking him because he was the first conversation, right? And I remember beforehand talking to my husband about it and saying, like, well, I'm nervous because he's never done a romance before, so I don't know how he's going to take to that, or like, I just have questions and I would like to be involved without stepping on people's toes either, because there is a point at which you do have to like learn to let go a little bit, and I want to see what they come up with and how they interpret it from their own eyes as well, right? So it's like a very collaborative mix that I was hoping for. And when I kind of like broached the subject with him on that first call and I said, like, how involved could I be? He's like, I want you in the editing room. Like, if you want to go and do stunts with the stunt guy, like hang out with these people, and I want you on set all the time. And it was just like, this is exactly what I wanted. And he really, like, on top of that, he asked me a lot of questions that I wasn't expecting. Like, is there anything that you would do differently? I want you to be involved in this piece and that piece, and like all the way through. And they really have lived up to that as well. Like I'm sure if you read it in the Variety piece or Dateline, there's a thing about, oh, they haven't found a screenwriter yet. We actually have now. It just hasn't been announced yet. So even in that process, like when they were putting the presentation together that they send out to screenwriters to sort of solicit their interest, they sent that all to me first. Like, would you change anything? Would you add anything? And I added bits and pieces, and and this is what we're doing next. And we're talking to so and so. So I'm actually talking to the screenwriter on Monday. So yeah, they've been great about involving me, really, truly, like living up to that, and involving me in every piece.
Have you, as going into like assisting with the screenwriting process, have you found any interesting differences between like the process of writing it as a novel versus thinking more visually for the screenwriting process?
I think I haven't quite gotten there yet. I have read some scripts by, like, I haven't read a lot of screenplays, I'll be honest with you. But I have a friend who's a screenwriter, and I've read some of her stuff, and it is a very different way of doing things. And she keeps saying, like, you should try it. But it's like the format, like, I kind of feel like when I'm writing, I need to be in a certain kind of like format and like a frame in my head. And it's more broken up because, exactly to your point, like, you have to have visual cues, and then the whole structure of it is so different. So I think I'm going to get there for sure pretty fast, but and it'll be an interesting like learning curve to try and see like how she's thinking about things and representing it a little differently.
To you and to anybody in the room, whoever was like, I want to read a movie script. One of the best like scripts that I've written or written. One of the best scripts I've written. One of the best scripts I've read in a long time is the script for Get Out by Jordan Peele. And if you just Google like movie scripts or TV scripts, you can usually find a database. But that is a very good example of what goes from page to screen. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So does the process of gearing up for the adaptation of Butcher and Blackbird affect your plans for any future work? Like, did you have any projects that you were gearing up for or in the midst of that have sort of taken a backseat to the adaptation, or are you still able to balance all that out?
Yeah, I'm still able to balance all that out. Fortunately, it might like end up creeping into my thought process a little bit about like how, if this thing was to be adapted, like how would it be visually represented. But I see everything in my head so visually anyway, and I'm trying to like get that out onto the page in a way that people can digest it without being like too burdensome or too detailed. So like it might end up creeping in, but definitely it hasn't affected any projects yet. Don't know how that'll work out when they're like, they're going to the set and like play in the editing room. Like, you don't want me to do that, but okay. Like it's all just going to be eyeballs everywhere and I'll be grossed out. But yeah, I think for now it's all like I'm still trekking along on all the things that I really want to do and the next series basically.
Excellent. Well, speaking of that, in a roundabout way, I want to check in with my wife. Wife, do you have any questions?
I do, yes. So my question is, I know for a fact I've never met an author in my life who's only working on one thing at once. So beyond this series, what else are you working on right now that is really exciting to you? What are you creating right now that's really exciting for you?
So I'm kind of like I'm toying with an idea that I can't really talk about yet too much. There are a couple of like side ideas, but the main thing that I'm focused on, which I am very excited about, is the next series. So my publisher had bought it in the spring. It's a 3-book series and it is a dark romantic comedy. It's like small town. Um, 3 interconnected standalones. So I've started the first one and it's just really fun. I'm having a good time with it. So I'm really excited for all 3 books in this series. And it can be a little hard, like when you're writing a series, to really think about like what 2 and 3, well, for me anyway, because I'm a pantser. I'm sure plotters are probably thinking, how do you not know? And I'm like, I don't know what's gonna happen next. But I have like a bit more of an idea of what I want to do with books 2 and 3, and I'm just like equally excited about all of them. It's just really nice.
Wonderful. Yay. I love hearing that you're making more. I just want authors to tell me that they're going to write more. That's all I want.
Definitely got a lot like planned over the next few years. So yeah, I might even like go back to re-editing like some of my previous stuff. So we'll see. Yeah, there's a lot to do. There's a lot to keep me busy and out of trouble, theoretically.
Speaking of re-editing in a roundabout way, I assume that when you sat down at the keyboard to write Butcher and Blackbird, you didn't think, okay, time to write with the preparation of having this turned into a movie. So when that happened, did you retroactively think back to anything in the book going, I might have went too far. There's no way they're going to get that on screen. Was there any sort of like, oh shit moments after the fact, or you're like, it's their problem now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's their problem now. I guess by extension, it's also mine. But like, I was just kind of like, whatever. Like, it's in there. Whatever is in there, people like or dislike different bits and pieces. But I'm really happy with the end result. So if there are things that they're really like, look, Brynne, we're not going to be able to do this thing, like But they have been great about wanting to get as much as they can in and like really stay true to the vibe. So there's nothing in there that I'm really like, oh, I shouldn't have put that ice cream in there. No,
it's the fucking ice cream. I read that and I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to tell my wife the ice cream part. But what I did tell my wife about the book, and she mentioned this on Threads over the summer. I was reading it and I said, this book makes me excited to poop, because like most people, that's when I do my reading. And I realized this is a compliment, because it is. Shut up.
That's how I took it too. I think I might have seen that on Threads, because I think I remember seeing something like that and thinking, yeah, that makes sense.
Hi, it was me. I'm the one.
I know a lot about your habits now.
Exactly. Probably too much, but there is a point to all this. And I realized that there are 2 things about that book that really stood out to me. One was obviously the humor, and I would like to follow up on that in a second. But I was really impressed with the pacing of the book. It clipped along, and then every time I could in a really good way feel like I knew the end of the chapter was coming. I was ready for the end. Ooh, okay, I like where we left off. where are we going next? And it clipped along. Again, it was very reminiscent of an Edgar Wright film, which was very tightly plotted, very tightly paced. The action came where I wanted it to, and then it moved on. Was that something you intentionally focused on, or do you feel like you have a knack for pacing, or was that sort of the rewrite process that sort of, and the revision process that sort of hammered that out?
No, I don't actually do a lot of like massive changes when I edit something. So normally when I do a first draft, because I kind of the way I write is like I'll sit down and I'll actually go back a couple of paragraphs and spend about like 10 or 15 minutes like editing that piece or rereading it and just getting into the zone so I can like get started and remember what I was what I was doing and what I was thinking. So by the time that I get like the full first draft done, I'd say it's pretty like close to final, and I don't tend to do a lot of rewrites. So and I think I probably write in kind of a weird way that I bounce around a lot. So when I started Butcher and Blackbird, I wrote the first like maybe chapter and a half, and then I bounced forward and I did the Harvey Mead chapters, and then I bounced backwards and I did the Thorsten chapters. But I kind of have an idea in my head of like, I guess it's a knack. I hope that I hope that makes sense. Like of just sort of feeling it. Like I'll feel if something is kind of missing, and I have to put something in there to better explain like their relationship or their thought process. And then I'll like feel if it's dragging too much. At least for me, like not everything that an author produces is going to fully resonate with everybody, right? Of course, but yeah, I just kind of go off of vibes, I guess, and like what sort of feels like the right cadence for humor, and then like something gory and something like romantic, and kind of constantly trying to like keep that moving.
Absolutely.
It's not very scientific. It's all
No,
like
no.
fives.
Well, no, I mean, you popped pretty early on to being a pantser, and so I
Yeah.
think that's really interesting that you were like, okay, because there's this killer that they're going after, and then this killer that they're going after, and there's also on top of all that, there's also the time jumps because
Yeah.
it's the annual competition, and I thought it was all very like I never once had to like double back and go, where are we? When are we? It was all very fluid and interconnected. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The humor, there it was like the second page, where I had my first literally laugh out loud moment when Rowan sees her knife and asks her where she gets the knife.
It's like Etsy.
Etsy, gorgeous knife, mask of steel. Where'd you get it? Etsy. That's when I knew that this was going to be both my vibe and my jam. So like you said, you've copped to being, you agree that the Canadian sense of humor, which is also inspired by England, those kind of things are intermingled. So for you, was the inclusion, was it important to you to infuse these books with humor, or is that just sort of an extension of who you are as a person and your personality? You value humor.
Yeah, I really value humor. I love making people laugh, and I probably try to do it too much. Like at work, I work with this guy who's like a very buttoned up, like Russian scientist guy. I mean, he's not like he's been here for like decades or whatever. And I'm like constantly trying to make this guy laugh in meetings, which is like an impossible task. But I was like, I'm always trying to like make people laugh, even at like the worst times. So I think there's part of that, and it just like comes through. But I definitely think that like I was already writing dark romance and serial killers and stuff. But when people would tag me in reviews and they had, like very specific things to say, it was often like, "Oh, I really enjoyed the humorous bits in this." So it was like when I started writing B&B, I was sort of like, I'm just going to lean into what I love to do, which is write those humorous passages and really, really focus on that rather than making it just like a nice to have, like, oh, it shows up once in a while, but like really make it the heart of the story. So yeah, for me that was super fun. And I think now looking back too, I was doing that with like the Shadow Realm series is like that's technically more of a dark romantic paranormal series. So that's why I'd like to really go back and like clean that up and make it more in line with my current sort of style. Just, you learn and you grow. And there are some things that I'd love to refine in there, but really focusing on that comedic aspect. It's definitely part of my like everyday life for sure.
To that end, another thing that I really appreciated about it was I thought that you had an exceptional ear for dialogue, which is something that a lot of writers struggle with. But it was all very natural. It felt never felt stilted. Is that a how do you approach dialogue when you're where do you value the position of dialogue in the hierarchy of like I have to make sure that these things are just so in terms of plot and pacing? Where does dialogue rank for you?
Dialogue is like for me when I'm writing a scene, and this is part of the reason why I bounce around so much when I'm writing, is like I like to write the most vivid thing that I see and then kind of like build it from there. And with that, like not only do I see things very visually in my head, but I hear the characters talking to each other. And kind of like it just sort of it's like chunks get kind of built onto it, like natural responses as they interact with each other, but they're also, they're influenced by both their external environment and whatever their past is. So for me, I'm fortunate because it kind of just comes out of this like process of being in a different world almost and just hearing them talk. I think what can get a little trickier is like trying to balance that out with like not only that dialogue but the internal stuff, their observations, the physical stuff. And that's all kind of just instinct of like, oh, it just feels like this paragraph is a little too short, or it feels like they're because of the nature of their conversation it has to be like this person, this person, this person, this, like it has to be faster paced. But it's all that's just like kind of an instinct thing. What I hear though is definitely like them talking to each other and just kind of like trying to, I guess, just it's like everyday observations of people. It just kind of molds that in your head. So it's weird witchcraft.
No, absolutely. I'm a big fan of the just throw everything out there method, see what sticks. Like they're not all going to be zingers. They can't be. It's fine.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you still keep your day job at this point. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you to go into any more details about that than you're comfortable with, but that's something that I'm fascinated with is as an independent author who has broken out and had this wonderful success, but still maintains that day job. First of all, I mean, does everybody that you work with know your alter ego, as it were, and what's that like in terms of the dynamic? I'm guessing you're probably fully remote if you're moving countries and still working for the same place, or you're not fully remote.
No, I'm office based like 3 days a week. Typically, we're a little bit flexible. So, typically, like Tuesdays through Thursdays, people will go in. I'm not far from the office. I'm only about like 10 minutes away. So that's why they wanted me to move here, was so that I could go in more because of my like position and stuff. But yeah, they don't like most people know, but they don't all know like what I'm doing or any details. And they're very very good about like if they know I don't want them to read it or I don't want them to know too much, they have been wonderful about being like, oh, don't tell me anymore, like, oh, I don't want to know, like, or even if another colleague who does know everything tries to tell them, they're like, no, 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 I don't want to know, she doesn't want me to know. So they've been like great. And I just find it. I work in pharma R&D, and I find it so like the people I work with are just so multifaceted and interesting, and I've gotten to like meet so many fascinating people who are so much smarter than me, and I find that really inspiring. And gotten to travel all over the place, which is really cool. So, will I be able to do it indefinitely? maybe not, but I've really I do really enjoy it, and I find a lot of inspiration in the people that I work with. So I'm very grateful for that, for sure.
Excellent. And in a weird sort of downstream sort of way, I consult pharmacies. So I consult
Oh,
pharmacies
cool.
on buying the medications that ultimately your company probably works on. So it's the
Yeah.
circle of life.
It really is, and it went all the way to
Yes.
the bathroom.
The circle of day jobs. Yeah,
Yes.
I told 2 people that I work with what I was doing this weekend. Everybody else, I was just like, I'm going to Virginia to hike. You don't need to know.
Don't need to know anything more than that.
You don't need to know where we're going here. Exactly. We're hiking in Virginia. You don't need to worry about it.
Yeah, I hike. Yeah.
What do you read when you have time to read?
I typically read dark romance for sure. I read some contemporary romance. I really like Abby Jimenez's books. So I kind of bounce around a little bit. There's some stuff that on occasion, I'll reread some things that I really, really love. The Road is one of my favorite books of all time. So I'll go back and reread that on occasion, but I haven't had as much time to read lately as I would like to. But yeah, it kind of runs the spectrum a bit.
Wait, you read The Road and then wanted to read it again?
It is so dark. What I love about that book is how because it's this, for anybody who doesn't know, it's very post-apocalyptic, extremely dark, and it's very sad. And a boy and his dad, they have to they're trying to get to a safe place. They're following a road, but it's extremely dangerous. There's a lot of very dark shit that happens in that book. And what I love about it so much is that the prose is very fitting with the atmosphere of the book. It's beautiful, but it's also stark. And it was the first time that I read prose like that where I was like, wow, that just matches the vibe of the book itself. It's it feels like the writing is post-apocalyptic to me. I don't know how to really describe it. But I've read it multiple times, and usually what happens is I'll read it before my husband wakes up. I like to read it in the morning for some reason when I do a reread. It's almost like this ritualistic thing for me, and I'll do it maybe once a year, once every few years. And my husband will inevitably come downstairs when I'm reading the last bit of the book, and I will be sobbing, and he'll be like, "You're reading that fucking book again, aren't you?" Yes, it's so sad. He's like, I know what happened. We saw the movie.
And it was worse because I could see it happening with my actual eyes.
I know, it's so bad.
Not my mind.
It's so dark. Really yeah.
This is the 4th author profile we have done where Cormac McCarthy has been brought up. Yep.
No way.
Yep.
He's got a profound effect on our brains, I think.
Something. Yeah. So, but speaking of influences, I wanted to double back because when we were first asked to have this conversation with you, somebody told me something about you that I found fascinating. And then as I read Butcher and Blackbird, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And that is that apparently you can hear any sentence and just connect it to a line of dialogue from Hot Fuzz.
I might have over-exaggerated that, okay. But yeah, pretty much. I mean, I've watched it. I don't even know how many times. We quote it all the time at the house. So yep. Yeah, I absolutely love that movie. Yeah. Yes.
If you as Hot Fuzz, the Cornetto trilogy, Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, World's End. Yep, greatest 3 movies. I always say my favorite movie is whatever Edgar Wright made. Yeah, we're also a bit for a long time. Morning Angle was just the thing that was
Can I get your autograph?
Yeah,
it's for the breakfast.
Exactly. We're not going to quote Hot Fuzz at you for another 20 minutes, I promise. Do you have any questions for Brynne?
No.
That's okay.
I'm not the interviewer.
Yeah, I'm the one that usually handles the interview questions. So if you want to go listen to the podcast, she talks way more. So does anybody in the audience have any questions? All you have to do is just come up here. I'll hold the microphone in front of your face. Just stare directly into the camera. look into Brynne's eyes.
Like, come closer.
Yeah, or you can
Closer.
stand up over there.
I can Vanna White it.
Yeah, Vanna White. Does anybody have any questions for Brynne before? Because I can keep doing this all day, but I don't want you. Oh, we have a comment. Oh no, somebody enjoyed the orzo pasta scene very much. I don't know if you could hear that. You're in veterinary. Is that? Oh, so you've seen lots of orzo.
Ew.
Oh.
Okay, so very accurate. Apparently, that is what it is compared to. My wife is going to vomit. No, it's okay. So yeah, so would Edgar Wright? Are there any other directors that sort of, or any other visual artists? Because this is what I thought was fascinating: is that at the front of the book, there's also playlists for each chapter. So is that more of a playlist of like what you were listening to when you were writing those chapters, or sort of like to give the vibe of what's going on in the chapter?
Yeah, I really love listening to music as I'm both writing and reading. I spend a long time. I actually usually start compiling a playlist before I even start writing the book. I'm just like kind of what the book is already sort of feeling like to me. And if I hear a song, I'll just like put it in the playlist. But I'm kind of constantly adjusting it. So it's actually technically the first thing that I start before I even start writing a book. And it's typically the last thing that I'm like always scrambling at the end to like, oh, there's just something missing. I need one more song, or this one needs to move to this chapter or whatever. So it's like a constant work in progress from the beginning to like the bitter end. And I do like, I really, if I hear a song, especially for a chapter or a scene that I'm writing that has like a heavy emotional component to it, then I'll often like repeat that same song over and over until my husband is like, please just stop. Like, and I'll be like writing with this song like on constant repeat, just because I need that like that vibe. I think music can add so much to the experience, at least for me. I know other people can find it very distracting, but like for me, it kind of just like melds into it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, what I was starting to drive at with the director thing before I pivoted to music was, I think that all forms of art and media are sort of interconnected, and one can influence and inspire and inform the other. Do you pull inspiration from other books, other movies? Where do you tend to find not necessarily ideas, but just thoughts or inspirations or motifs where you're creating that sort of like Pinterest board in your brain for the project that you're working on?
I think, well, with B&B, I drew a lot of inspiration from some of my like favorite horror movies. I really like some of the classic horror movies. So with Harvey Mead, that was like heavily influenced by the types of like 70s like slasher films or whatnot, like Texas Chainsaw. Then like Thorsten was more like that, want to be like very, very highly intelligent, or at least he thinks he is. That's a bit of the satire that comes in, right? Like a highly intelligent Hannibal Lecter type of guy. So like the movies, definitely those movies influenced a lot of that book. I think otherwise it's like a lot of just observations about people, or just things that I see around like people's interactions. I think I'm kind of constantly maybe cataloging some of that stuff and just thinking, oh, that's like interesting. That's interesting that that person would say that or behave like that, or like, I wonder what they're thinking, and making up little stories in my head about them. So, but for sure, like British comedy does, like the darker British comedies, like Death at a Funeral, that hilarious. It's so funny. Like those kinds of interactions between characters and scene setups and things like that definitely like factor into my thought process, I'm sure.
When it comes to horror, I think that comedy and horror work really well together, and I think that Butcher and Blackbird straddled that line really well. Do you personally feel that there's a value in having humor in horror to sort of lighten that, so it's not that constant just, Ari Aster Hereditary, just one horrific incident after another.
Yeah, I think it's such a fun, different take on horror. Like I love horror, but I don't know. I think it's a nice introduction for people to see like how dark do they want to go without it getting too dark. There's always some kind of like comedic aspect to sort of soften the blow. Like even Hot Fuzz has some like pretty gory moments in it, right?
Oh, yeah.
When the church fire comes down on the guy's head, and it's like, whoa, actually, that's quite gory, but it's also really funny. And I think I like challenging people's preconceived notions, or like how they feel like they're going to react, and then like send them in a different direction. I think that's really fun. Like it's fun for any of us to like think super differently about something, and sort of subvert your expectations. And I'll give you like a weird example that just happened yesterday, and it's totally different, and it might feel like it's disconnected, but to me it's not. But I was listening to, there's an Addison Rae song. It was the first time I actually heard it, which was Pepsi. And almost toward Diet Pepsi, I think it's called. And anyway, towards the end of the song, there's a key change, and the key change goes down instead of up. And I was like, whoa, that's so different. Like so many songs have key changes, and at that point in a song, it usually goes up. So to have that, like a key change where you would expect it, but it subverts your expectations because it's going down. It's like that to me was like, wow, that's super cool. And I like listened to it a few times until my husband was like, please stop. But I was just like mind blown, like I love that idea of like taking something people would expect and like, oh, I expected I would be super grossed out by the people eating, but actually it wasn't so bad because it was funny, and I wasn't expecting it to be funny, but it was.
I love that you said that. I am a music obsessed geek myself, and when you said key change, but it went down, the look on my face, because I've performed music, I've performed songs with key changes, and they always go up.
They always go up. Yeah, same. Like I've been in bands and stuff, and that's like I played piano for like a decade, but like I don't think I've ever heard a song with a key change, like that kind of song in that kind of genre, like going down. I don't think I've ever heard it like that before. It's like, wow, so cool. You got to listen to it now.
I do. I'm going to immediately go do that. It's so fascinating that I had a question. I was like, don't forget this question. But then you said that, and I was like, fuck. I forgot my question. Oh, that's so great. Addison Rae, Pepsi, or Diet Pepsi. Does anybody know the song? Anybody know what a key change is? Yes. Okay. I want to make sure. I don't want to insult it. Yeah, they want it. Exactly. Usually they want it to go up because they want you to intensify, not piss you off and bring you down.
No, but if you think about it, though, that's a natural thing, too, because when you're reading a book or you're watching a movie or something, things can push it down.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Neat, though, that you found something that did that.
Yep. They were just, yeah. Oh, I love it. So great. I'm geeking out about this. Okay, this is the last chance. We've got a little bit more time, but I don't want to take up any more time than we need to. Any final questions for Brynne before we cut her loose? Yeah, say thank you to Brynne.
Thank you for having me.
Well, in that case, Hun, do you have anything to say to Brynne before we cut her loose and give her a few minutes back of her time?
It was so lovely to speak with you today. Thank you for being with us. I'm sorry you couldn't be here in person, but have so much fun with your friend.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me and for like arranging for this kind of setup and being so accommodating. I really appreciate it.
Oh no, it was a blast. Everybody say goodbye to Brynne Weaver.
Goodbye, Brynne.
Brynne, thank you so
everybody.
much for joining us. I'm gonna press stop and you can depart anytime you like.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.